Welcome everybody to the first session of Zoom Basics and Best Practices. My name is Kenny Hirschman. I am the manager of the Frankfort Center of Learning and Scholarly Technologies, and I have here with me Adrika Rahman.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Adrika?
I would love to. So, hi everyone. My name is Adrika. I've had the pleasure of working at the Frankfurt Center for over a year now. I mostly support students with the TPA, but I love working with faculty as well. And I know that I speak for me and for Kenny and Dermot that we're definitely here for you for all of your technological needs. So definitely reach out whenever you need to.
Thank you, Adrika. Wonderful. Adrika is amazing, and she's a problem solver. So if you have questions or if there's something you need, you can go right to her. You can send questions to soehelp at Frankfurt or at hunter.cuny.edu, and Adrika has access to that email. I have access, and Dermot has access. So you'll hear from one of us for sure. So today we're here to talk about Zoom. Who here? I can't see everybody. Hold on, let me expand this. There we go. So who here has used Zoom already? Okay, everybody. Two people don't have their video on, so I can't tell if you're raising your hand. You can just unmute yourself and say me if you want. Oh, there we go. We got a thumbs up. And Virginia? Do a thumbs up if you've used it. All right. Well, anyway, it sounds to me like everybody here has at least some experience with it. Today we're gonna go over some of the more basic elements of it, and then we have a second session set up for the 21st where we'll talk about some of the more advanced uses of it. But with that said, if you have questions about things that we're not talking about today, I'm happy to answer them at the end. And then we also have office hours right afterwards from 2 to 4. So we can stay here and answer more questions afterwards. Sounds good? All right. So let's get started here. So the first thing I wanted to show you is, you've all used Zoom, so you probably already have it on your computer, but if not, you can download the client from zoom.us/download. And you want to download the client for meetings. Now, if you haven't used Zoom since before May, you may need to update your Zoom because in mid-May, they came out with Zoom 5, and at the end of May, they deactivated anything prior to Zoom 5 because Zoom 5 incorporates a lot of security upgrades that were necessary because back in the spring, you may remember there was this thing called Zoom bombing. It still exists. It's not done, but it's a lot harder for them to do it now because of the security enhancements that Zoom has made. But Zoom bombing was essentially when somebody invaded your Zoom session, and oftentimes, I actually happened to be in a session where this happened. We had, in our session at least, Russians that came in, and they were sharing their screen, and they were posting cartoon porn, and they were blasting music. So you don't want that to happen in the middle of your class. So it's a good thing that Zoom has updated their security, and we'll talk a little bit more about security in a bit. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And this is the main Zoom website, zoom.us. And it's important that you understand that there's a difference between the website and the desktop client. So when the previous page was to download the desktop client, the Zoom client for meetings, The website allows you to do some things that you can't do in the client. So one of the things that allows you to do once you sign in, so you're going to sign in here, is it allows you to set a large number of different settings. Yeah. So I don't have all of them here, but what I can do is log in. Actually, let me switch accounts. Okay. So here on the left, you have some different options. You have your profile, and in your profile, it will show your personal meeting ID. So everybody gets a personal meeting ID. And the idea behind the personal meeting ID is it's a constant number. It doesn't change. And that meeting ID you can use as much as you want. But you want to be careful who you give it to, because when you use your personal meeting ID, that means people have it and they can use it whenever they want. So you could be in the middle of a meeting with somebody and then all of a sudden somebody else pops in that you know but weren't expecting. So you want to be very careful about who you give that meeting ID to and make sure that people understand that they shouldn't be using it unless they have a meeting scheduled with you. Now, there are other ways of controlling who can come into your meeting so that you're not always going to end up in a situation where somebody logs into that meeting ID and they just instantly show up. There are ways of controlling so that doesn't happen. You can create a personal link and you can customize that. So if you want it to say some text like zoom.us/your name, and that's your meeting link, you can do that. So you can put in a custom personal link for that. The user type, there are two different kinds of user types that we have here. One is licensed and the other is basic. Licensed is the pro account. And what that gives you is the ability to meet for longer than 40 minutes. On a basic account, after 40 minutes, you get cut off. If you sign up for a personal Zoom account, a free account, that's a basic account. That's what you're getting. You're getting a limit of 40 minutes. Now, on a free basic account, you also cannot use some of the features like the breakout rooms. I don't know if that's totally true if you have a basic account on our Zoom account, but either, certainly if you have your personal basic account, you're not going to get breakout rooms. All meetings for licensed users have up to 300 people. For basic users, it's up to 100 people. So we have at Hunter right now 3 different ways potentially of getting a Zoom account. Right now there's a Zoom account through the School of Ed, there's a Zoom account through the college, and shortly there'll be a Zoom account through CUNY using your CUNY First login. That should take effect toward the end of the month. So you'll probably be hearing something from us at that time about either migrating your account or claiming an account through the CUNY effort. Because ultimately what we're going to seek to do once that kicks in is to get rid of our account, because we pay for that. So we'd rather save the money and spend it elsewhere if CUNY's going to already have provide accounts to everyone. And those accounts will be for students, faculty, and staff. So all students will have their own Zoom accounts as well. Let's see. So there's a bunch of other configurations here, not so important. Under meetings, under meetings, you'll see any meetings that you have coming up, and you'll see previous meetings that you participated in, the personal meeting room information, and some meeting templates. So you can schedule a meeting from right within this environment. You can also schedule meetings in the desktop application, which I'll show you in a few moments, but, but you can do everything you need to within the website as well. The thing that the website gives you that you can't get in the desktop application are these really long lists of options. And everybody has the same ability to customize all of these options. I don't have time to go over all of them, but there are a few to think about. A lot of them are already set up by default. For example, the waiting room is set up by default. And that's a security feature that we'll talk a little bit more about. Requiring a passcode to schedule new meetings. One of the new security enhancements that Zoom made is that all sessions must either use the waiting room or a passcode. There's no more sessions without one or the other. You can require so some more options for passcode for instant meetings and personal meeting ID. I wouldn't worry too much about those. For scheduling a meeting, you can have the host and participant videos on by default, but it's a good idea for security purposes to keep these off. People can turn on their own video if they want to, but if you do get Zoom bombed, you don't want the video to be on automatically because you don't know what's going to be on their video. I can tell you it's not always something you want automatically showing up. For audio type, you want to leave it on telephone and computer audio because you need to have the options for students that don't have acceptable options for computer audio. Giving them the option to use telephone, it also gives them the ability to access TTY services. And let's see, so join before host. This is an option that will show up on the desktop application. You want to leave this off. The reason being is that if you leave this on, let's say you've chosen to have a password, you leave this on, people can join the meeting before you get there. Now let's say somebody Zoom bombs and they're in the meeting and you're not there yet. You have no control over what's happening in that room. So you don't want to allow people to join before you. What they will see is a message that says the host will be joining soon and let you into the room. Let me see, there's a couple of other ones here that you might want to look at. So auto-saving chats, this is not on by, I don't think this is on by default, but if you like to keep your chats as a record of what happened in the class, you can set it to save automatically. So we have some questions. I'll come to the questions in a moment. Once we get through this, I believe file transfer is on by default, but you can actually send and receive files in Zoom, in the chat. And let's see. So you can see everything is controllable here. You can turn things on, you can turn them off. The advanced options, there may be a few that are not on by default. So closed captioning is not on by default. If you want to do closed captioning, you can, but what that means is one person has to type them out. That may be important for some classes. You can use the virtual backgrounds, or you can not allow the virtual backgrounds if you don't want people to use them. And that's pretty much all the ones that you really need to worry about, but I would highly recommend that you go through this list. I think it's really important to know exactly how you have this thing configured so that it can be tuned exactly the way that you want it. so let's move on to the app. But before we do that, does anybody have any questions? And I'll take a look at what's in here. Using the personal ID or generating new ones for synchronous sessions. So yeah, Adrika was right. We definitely recommend generating new IDs where possible. Again, if you use your personal ID, it kind of exposes an ID that's locked to your account. You can change it, but it requires contacting Zoom to have them change it. It's much better to create a new ID for your course. Now you can create a recurring ID. So you can create a separate ID that functions in the same way as your personal ID, but it's not your personal ID. So you can have a single ID for your class for every meeting. You don't have to have a separate one for each session. But I do recommend that you generate a new ID. You can, Judith, you cannot have two meetings running at the same time on the same account. Which is, what's that?
I'm sorry. You say when you get a CUNY First account, it's going to change from what we have right now into a CUNY First. Does that imply also creating new passwords, or it's just automatically it's just because CUNY First is going to pay instead of the School of Ed?
So once the CUNY accounts become active, you'll log in with your CUNY First user account. So you don't need a new password, you just need to know that password.
That change will happen before the first week of classes?
No. As far as I know, that will happen at the end of August. I don't know what the implementation process will be to migrate accounts. So some people here may have accounts through Hunter College, and some people may have accounts through the SOE. Most of the SOE accounts are for staff and full-time faculty, and we've directed most adjuncts to get accounts through Hunter College. But there are some exceptions. So Hunter College may migrate those accounts sooner than the School of Ed.
Or they may just migrate the whole thing. Oh, okay. Automatically. All right.
But even if we haven't migrated your account, you can always claim your CUNY account.
So as a full-timer, then I will have to use as the password the CUNY account, which is the same one as the Blackboard. Is that it? Or would I use my current password for one?
So we haven't really figured out a lot of the details around this yet because CUNY hasn't really announced much to the public. So we don't know all the details of their implementation and how that affects the various instances of Zoom that have been used at all the different schools. Because we're not the only school that has been using Zoom this whole time. So every school has contracted with Zoom over the last, at least over the last 6 months, some much longer than that. At some point, we're going to need to merge all those accounts into one account because there's no point in us all paying for separate accounts when CUNY's already providing this service to the entire university. How that's going to happen and what that will look like is really up in the air at this moment. It won't be terribly painful, but the worst that could happen would be that we can't migrate your account. Rather, you just have to go and claim the account, and you'll create a new meeting ID that you'll have to use at that point.
I could see a worse scenario, having to start the first few classes on the old system and then having to change systems in the middle. And knowing what happened last semester,
the same system though, Paul. The only difference is that you would be signing into a different account and you would have to use a different meeting ID.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the key right there, is that should this transition happen after the semester begins, which it likely will, you may need to change the meeting ID that you're using for your meetings. I'm not saying that that's going to be absolute because I don't know yet. If there's a way for us to just migrate your accounts, we'll do that. If there's not a way for us to migrate the accounts, then you'll have to start with a new meeting ID.
Changing horses in midstream.
It's a minor change, Bob. It's considering what we've all been through in the last 6 months, it's relatively minor.
Hi, Kenny. I had a question about the safety
Yeah.
features you were talking about. Is there one that's recommended or suggested over the other or more secure, just in terms of either requiring a passcode or enabling the waiting room? Is there anyone that provides more security than the other, or like what would you recommend in terms of that?
Well, I mean, for maximum security, you could use both. The requirement from Zoom is that it's one or the other, but that does not preclude you from using both.
And I've also been in a few sessions that like received an invitation where I was provided a passcode, but I
Yes.
didn't have to use the passcode. So is it such that like if you have the link, that passcode is automatically included in the
So
in the
when you assign a passcode onto a meeting, it gives you a link that has the passcode built into the link.
Okay.
So you can use the link, or you can manually insert the meeting ID and the passcode.
Okay.
So you can see here on the screen, when you first open the desktop application, this is what shows up for you. You can just join a meeting. You don't have to sign in. If you hit join a meeting, you can either paste a link or you can type in the meeting ID. If there is a security password on the meeting, once you type in the meeting ID, it'll ask you for the passcode. If you paste in a link that includes the password, it skips that step. Now for students, they will probably just join the meeting. They don't really need to, or they'll click on the link that you provide. They don't really need to sign in. We don't give them accounts. Once this CUNY implementation happens, they'll have accounts. And then there's another security feature you can use, which we can't use right now because students don't currently have Zoom accounts, which is that you can mandate that only logged in users can join your meeting. And that's even more security because only CUNY students, staff, and faculty will have logins. So anyway, so as I said, you can just join a meeting and you'll have an opportunity to paste in the meeting ID or the link. You can input your name and you can set up whatever options are appropriate for you. Or you can sign in if you have an account. So currently, with our Hunter or SOE accounts, you just sign in with your email address and password. Once we switch to CUNY first, you would sign in with SSO, single sign-on, and that will take you to the CUNY first login. Once you log in, this is what you'll see. I assume, has anybody not seen this? Does everybody have the desktop application?
Kenny, quick question.
Yes, Todd.
My question is, will Google Classroom and Zoom still be able to be used together like they were during the summer?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why you can't use Zoom while you're using Google Classroom. In terms of together, I'm not sure if what you're referring to is simply pasting a link into Google Classroom.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And if you decide to use a passcode, the link that they provide will include the passcode in it. So you just paste the link into Google Classroom and that students will get right in, no problem.
Great.
Okay. So on this home page of the app, you'll notice on the top, there is 4 different options: home, chat, meetings, and contacts. And then in the main area of the page, you have these 4 large buttons: new meeting, join, schedule, and share screen. There's also in the corner a little image, or it might just be your initials. It depends on whether you have uploaded a picture or not. You click on that, this brings you to the main menu. I want to just show you two things on the main menu. The first one here is settings. And if you click on settings, you have the ability to control some of the settings from within the app. So you have general, you have video, there's audio and share screen settings, and recording settings and so forth. There's a whole bunch of settings that you can do on here. But there's also a bunch of settings you cannot control from the app. And those are the settings you would have to log into the website to control that I showed you earlier. The other thing to look for here is check for updates. Periodically, you want to check and make sure that you're using the most up-to-date version of Zoom, because they do provide security enhancements from time to time. Zoom 5.0, of course, is the most recent version, but I think they're actually on like 5.2 now or something like that. Up here on the top, the meetings section is where you will see all the meetings that you have currently scheduled, upcoming meetings, recurring meetings, that sort of thing. And this is what the meetings page looks like. On the top, you see your personal meeting ID and the various meetings that you have scheduled. Some of them are recurring and some may be one time. Most of the ones that I have in my account, which is here, are recurring. So this is the faculty check-in meeting that we're in right now. So we use this for our workshops and we use this for our online office hours that we do every day from 2 to 4 p.m. A little plug. So you'll notice in the right-hand side, when you're clicked on the faculty check-in, it gives you the basic information. You have these different buttons. You can start your meeting from here. You can copy the full invitation and then paste that into an email or into like a Google event or something like that. You can edit the settings. You can delete the session, and don't worry about joining from a room. It doesn't really apply. You can also show the full meeting invitation, which will just display right underneath, and copy and paste whatever information from the meeting you want to use. Sometimes it's not necessary to use the entire invitation.
Let me ask, if the class is scheduled to begin at a particular time, they know that, the students know that. Is it necessary to send an invitation? I mean, is that...
No, but you're going to paste the link into Blackboard or Google Classroom. So that's where you would get the link from.
Okay.
You'll also get it when you first schedule the meeting. So right here on the home page is the schedule button. You click the schedule button and it's going to take you to the schedule meeting window. And these are the options you get. So this is all within the desktop app. It's a little bit different when you do this in the website. The website does give you a few more options than you have here, but usually what you get in the desktop app is more than adequate. So you can give the meeting a topic name. You can assign the date and time of the meeting and the end time of the meeting, or you can click recurring meeting so that it stays around. Oops. Under generate automatically, under meeting ID, you can select generate automatically, or you're using your personal meeting ID. As we said earlier, we recommend generating automatically. Here's where you can mandate the password. You click on this button and it will automatically generate a password for you. You can change that to whatever password you want. And then again, you can set the video for participants and host on or off. I recommend off, but it's up to you. And then again, audio, you want to leave at telephone and computer audio. This stuff on the right is what you actually see below because the window is too large to display here. You can automatically generate an event on a calendar. So you have iCal, which is the Apple calendar type. You have Google Calendar, and you have Outlook. The thing is, these only work using the websites. They don't create a file that can be used with your the calendar application on your Mac or the Outlook application on your Mac. It works only on the web version. So I like to just select other calendars. I find it much easier, and what it does at the end is it pops up a copy of the invitation. You can copy whatever information you need and post it where you want. So if you're posting it in your class, in an announcement, in a module, then you don't need a calendar. So using other calendars makes more sense anyway. And then finally, you have your advanced options. Again, if you don't select password or enable waiting room, Zoom will automatically select one of those for you. I think by default it will require a password. But if you enable waiting room, then it won't require the password. And then you can select or deselect enable join before host. Again, I would deselect that. Any questions? There's a lot of information. Okay, good. So now let's take a look at the Zoom environment. One of the unique things about doing a Zoom training while using Zoom is that I can't demonstrate the Zoom environment from this vantage point. So I had to use screenshots. So this was a meeting that I had earlier this year, and just to kind of demonstrate some of the features of the user interface. So for one thing, there's different ways of viewing video. You can view it in full screen, or you can have it in a window on your computer. Personally, I'm not a fan of full screen mode. I find it a little intrusive. So I try to keep things just contained in a window, and you can increase the size of the window as you please. You also have the ability to view video either in speaker mode, which is what you see here. The speaker will be really large, and then additional people will be on top, quite a bit smaller. Or you can have it in gallery view. And in gallery view, it's kind of like the Brady Bunch tiles. The thing about gallery view is that depending on the power of your computer, you're limited to somewhere between 20 and 25 people per screen. Some of the newer computers, more powerful computers, will allow you up to 49 people per screen, but they're really small. So I don't know that it's terribly helpful when they're that small to be able to see everybody. But it is nice when you're able to kind of get that picture of everybody at the same time. But keep in mind, even if you can see 49 people on your screen, that doesn't mean your students can. So you might have multiple pages to scroll through depending on how many students you have in your class. But once you're in gallery mode, then or gallery view, you'll notice that the button changes to speaker view because this is a toggle. So it's not telling you what you're viewing, it's telling you press this to go to speaker view. So the other features that you have in the main interface, up here in the upper left-hand corner, you'll notice if you're not in full screen mode, you might actually see this on your screen. But there's a little button, an I button. That I button, if you press it, gives you some basic information about the meeting, including the URL. the link. And you can copy that link just by clicking this button and paste it in an email, paste it into Blackboard or Google Classroom or wherever you want. Looking at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice the main navigation for the user interface. You'll see a lot of buttons there that you probably don't see on your own. When you're hosting the meeting, this is what you'll see. It also depends on the options that you have selected. So like, for example, if you don't have polling as an option that's selected, you won't see the polling button. If you have closed captions turned on, you'll see another button for closed captions, but that's not here. But for the most part, these are the buttons that you're going to see. On the left is the audio controls. This is important because sometimes this can be a problem. Normally you'll see the button when you're connected, it'll look like a little microphone and a green light will light up whenever you're speaking to indicate that you're being heard. And to the right of that, you'll see the little caret symbol. And if you click on that caret symbol, this window pops up that allows you to select the source for your audio, to select the output for your audio, and to set whatever appropriate settings there are. So you can switch to the phone audio, you can test your speaker and microphone, if you're not hearing something, and you can switch if you have like an external webcam or an external microphone or a headset, you might have to switch that manually. And you want to make sure that the speaker is appropriate as well, so that if you're using an external microphone, you might still need to use the system speakers, or maybe you have a separate speaker that you're using. So you want to just make sure that you're setting up your audio system exactly the way it should be for you. The next one is video. And with video, same idea. You have a little video camera there. And if it's on, if it's off, it will look like the video camera with a red circle and a line through it. But if you click the little caret, you have the ability to select the camera. Most people will only have one camera, but if you have a built-in camera and you have an external camera, you have an option. If you're on a phone or an iPad, you'll have the front camera and the back camera. So you can select which camera you're using at one time. You also have the ability to select a virtual background here if your computer is capable of it. Not every, excuse me, excuse me. If your computer is capable of a virtual background, you can use this feature. And it's kind of fun. It allows you to use all sorts of different backgrounds. And some computers also allow video backgrounds. The next one is security. This one's a really important option here because it allows you to quick controls when it comes to controlling what your participants are able to do and turning on and off some of the security features depending on what your needs are. So I mentioned waiting room. By default, if you've selected enabling waiting room by default, this will be checked. You can turn it off in your meeting. You don't have to leave it on the whole time. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll turn the waiting room off as I know people are coming in, and then I turn it back on once everybody's there so that anybody who's joining late or anybody that is not necessarily invited, if they try to join, they'll be in the waiting room. However, that can backfire on you because if somebody happens to join that's not supposed to be there during the period that you've disabled the waiting room, then you might have to kick them out. You can also allow participants to share their screen which is not set by default. And Virginia can speak to this one, because this happens all the time when we meet. When I ask her to share her screen, she tells me you have to allow me to. And this is where you do it. You come into security and you allow participants to share their screen. So this was another security enhancement that Zoom made, because people were coming in, sharing their screens with all sorts of lewd content. Any questions so far?
So, Penny, just to confirm, because this is very helpful with the security. So, no, like, we don't have to make somebody a co-host anymore now. We can just allow participants to share screen, or is it more case by case basis?
So they don't need to become a co-host to share their screen.
Okay.
Participants can share their screen as long as you allow that.
Okay.
The only reason you would need to make them a co-host is if you need them to help manage certain elements. Like, for example, I have Audrika was helping me manage the waiting room. As people were coming in, she was letting people in for me. I had to make her a co-host in order to enable that.
Okay. Thank you.
But simply to share your screen, you don't need to become a co-host. You can also disable chat here. You can disable or enable allowing students to rename themselves from here. And then over here, all the way to the right, you'll see the reactions. So you have 2 reactions that are built into this main navigation, and both participants and hosts have this. And you can have a thumbs up and you can have applause, and they appear in your video. So if everybody wants to hit one of those buttons. That's great. I don't see mine right now, so I'm not going to click mine, but it's a little different when you're sharing your screen. It doesn't appear like this, and we'll talk about that in the next session that we do. So just a couple more things to go over, and then I'll take whatever questions you have. So getting a little bit more specific with the audio, when you first log in, you might have to select how you're joining the audio. Sometimes people will have this set up automatically by default. Other times you have to actually manually make that choice. So you can choose to join with your computer if you have a microphone built into the computer, or if you have a headset, or you can select phone call. If you select phone call, it gives you a number to dial into and a meeting ID. And this is important. You also need to scroll up a little bit, because there's also a participant ID. Now, in the invitation, it gives you the meeting ID and the phone number, but not the participant ID, because you don't get that until you log in. The key to the participant ID here is that if you're using video and a phone, the two are not connected unless you connect them by the participant ID. So when you call in the number and enter in the meeting ID, it will ask you for a participant ID. You enter in that participant ID and it will merge your phone call with the video. And that's a nice feature if you want people to see who you are as you're talking. I see all the time in the list of participants, you'll see people with their video, and then you'll see a blank one with a phone number underneath it. That's somebody who dialed in and did not enter the participant ID. If they had added the participant ID, they would be you would see their video and a phone number. So for the video settings, by default, well, depending on how you have it set up, you may have it either default to turn on your video or have the video off. If the video is off, you have this red line through the icon, and you can select the camera to turn that on. So let's see. Oh, Something's wrong with my presentation. So the participants window, if you click on participants, and you can see this now, if you can go ahead and click on participants right now, and you'll see a list of people that are in the class right now or in the workshop right now. And if you put the mouse over them, I forget what you see from the participant's perspective, but from the host's perspective, you'll see a mute or unmute button and more. If you click on more, you have all of these options. So we were just talking a moment ago about making somebody a co-host. That's how you make them a co-host, by clicking on more on that person. You can also make them a host. Now be careful with this, because you make them a host, you're no longer the host. And so now you're reliant on them to make you the host back. The only reason why somebody needs to be host instead of a co-host has to do with breakout rooms, and we'll talk about that next week. Another important one here is allowing record. And this also comes into play with breakout rooms, because if you want to record the breakout sessions, you have to allow individuals to record, because you're not going to be able to do that unless you're sitting in one of those sessions. Only people in a breakout session can record that session. So allow record is an important function here as well. You can put somebody in the waiting room, you can remove them. If you remove someone, keep in mind, they will not be able to get back in. There is a setting on the website that allows you to control whether or not they're allowed back in, but by default, they will not be able to come back into that session. And you can report somebody. So if you do get a Zoom bomber, you can report and remove them. And I think when you hit report, it automatically removes them. The other thing that's important here is spotlight video. So if you want an individual to be spotlighted, you click on that, their video will come up, and that's what people will see. You do have the ability as a participant to pin a video, so you can go and pin somebody's video on your screen, but if I, as the host, spotlight somebody, that will override everything. It kind of forces you to watch whatever it is that I'm telling you to watch. And then you can also chat with an individual person. At the bottom of the participants window, you also have a more...
Sorry, could you show me where that is, the spotlight?
You have to be a host to see it.
Oh, okay.
So it's in the participant window. If you go to the More button, you can spotlight video. There's another way to do it. Let me see. From here. So if you hover over somebody's video, you'll see dots show up. You click on those dots, and you can do that right now. You can click on those dots, and a bunch of options will come up. If I'm the host, the options that come up include everything I just showed you. If you're a participant, you'll see pin video, and there might be one other one, I can't remember.
Mute.
Mute.
Add profile picture, hide, self-mute.
Yeah. So those are the two ways to do it.
One other question. How do you get that little purple circle there?
So this is a screenshot, and the purple circle I created in PowerPoint, in Google Slides.
Oh.
You're not going to see the purple circle.
I like that.
The next thing is the chat window. And so you can open up the group chat, and you can see the messages that are there right now. And you'll notice that there's a file button. And if you want to share a file with the group, you can click on the file button, and you can upload a file from your computer, or you can attach a Google Drive file or a OneDrive file. Oops. I have to go back and check my presentation because I feel like things are missing here. Another thing you can do under the two is you can switch between everyone and certain individuals. This is something that can be disabled in the settings. So you can have it be everyone and just you. But if you want them to be able to privately chat with each other, you can, I can hit 2 and then select one person that's in the room to send a chat message to, and it shows up as a private chat. I thought I had a screenshot for that, but apparently I don't. That seems to be missing. So that's all we really have to cover in this session. The remainder are the sharing screens, polling, breakout sessions that we're going to talk about in the next session. So does anybody have any questions about what we just covered?
When, let's say we have 30 people to admit, do you have to admit them one by one, or is there a button where everybody could be admitted?
If they're in the waiting room,
Yeah.
it gives you 2 options. One, you can admit all, or you can admit individuals. And that will show up every time that there's more than one person in the waiting room. So you might admit all, and then 3 more people show up, and you can admit all again.
I have another question. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had office hours, and I gave this person, I sent the link, copied the link to this person. So then I went on that same day where we had to meet. I clicked on start the meeting, and I was waiting. And then I thought, I wonder why she's not showing up. But anyway, so I checked my iPad, and I received an email from Zoom saying that that person was waiting for me. Is there a reason for that?
So there's 2 possibilities there. One is that she was in the waiting room, and sometimes it takes a few moments before they pop up. The other possibility is that they were in a different meeting ID. And if you have more than one meeting ID set up, you want to make sure that you're entering in the correct one and that they're entering in the correct one for the meeting that you have at that moment. So as an example, I have my personal meeting ID, and I have this ID, which we use for our office hours and our workshops. So if I set up a meeting with you for my personal ID, but you go into this meeting, I'll get an email saying that you're waiting, and it will tell me what the meeting ID is for the room that you're in. But that might not be the room that we were planning to meet in. Or perhaps that was the room that we were planning to meet in, but I went into the wrong room.
Because this happened after I got I was using my personal computer, and now that I got the computer from School of Ed, and I downloaded the new Zoom, so that's what this whole situation.
Yeah, but you want to also make sure that you're logged into the correct account. So do you have a personal Zoom account as well as the Hunter Zoom account?
I think you merged it, so I was using the department, CMT.
Who is this?
Jenny Castillo.
Oh, okay. It just says faculty there, so I can't.
I know, and that's another thing. Sometimes it shows my name, like I was just in a previous workshop. Other ones it says faculty. At one time, show my picture doesn't show my picture any longer. So I don't know.
So if you go into the participants window and you highlight over yourself, you can rename what's there.
Just rename, but not my picture.
Well, you can rename. Well, are you using your own account?
Yeah, I'm the same. With my email, Hunter's email, and my password.
Okay, so you haven't uploaded a picture into your.
I have. At one time, it did show in one of the workshops, and after that, I decided not to show. So I don't know.
What I would do is go back into your account on the website. So if you go, or actually here, I'll show you. So if you go into your settings, your profile, this is where you have the picture. So you have a picture here. If you have a picture here on your profile on the website, that's what should show up.
Yeah, I do have a picture, but as I said, one time it did show up and then it didn't show up. Now it's not showing up.
Yeah, I think maybe we should talk privately because there may be something going on. Maybe you have more than one account, or maybe something's not didn't transfer correctly. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We'd have to just kind of verify some of those details in terms of your account. But it might just there might be another reason, and I'd have to look at it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm gonna stop sharing. Adrika, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not necessarily. I was just going through the chat and answering everyone's questions. Nothing's sticking out right now. Sharon, did your answer get, I mean, your question get answered about how to change the virtual background?
I was able to see when Kenny was talking about it, when you go to the Carrot Nexus Stop video, but it asks for a green screen, and if you don't have a green screen, then the virtual background you look really weird.
Right. So there's a toggle for the green screen, and depending on your computer, if you can turn that toggle off, it will improve the quality of the background.
Choose virtual background. So
Yeah.
I'm picking one.
But if you scroll down, do you see the toggle for the green screen?
I can turn. I have a green screen off, and
Okay.
then it tells me my computer doesn't meet the minimum requirements without a green screen background.
Correct. So that's a limitation of your computer.
That's my computer.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then the only way you can use virtual backgrounds is if you have a green screen.
Is I have a green screen, and it has to be green.
Otherwise, you'll look transparent.
Yes, well, I don't know if you realize, if you saw that before, but I was playing with one of them, and I did start to look transparent. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, just really quickly, I can do a quick demonstration. So this is with the virtual background. If I select I have a green screen, I'll look like this.
Yeah, it's not so user-friendly.
Unless I have a green screen, in which case it will look better.
Yeah.
But,
you do have a green screen.
I do not have a green screen. No, I just have a relatively new computer. So I have the ability to uncheck that button.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, on your computer, that button cannot be unchecked.
Okay. So if I went to, do you know of a reasonably cheap green screen that one can purchase?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to like B&H Photo, or even Amazon probably has them. They shouldn't be terribly expensive. You can just buy like green paper, like a large green piece of paper to put behind you, and then just like tape it to the wall. That's sufficient. You know, in a professional setup, you would have like a whole stand that would hold up.
I don't want a whole stand,
Yeah.
you know.
But they make them for home purposes.
Okay.
They're not terribly expensive. Like you could probably find something for like $30.
Okay.
$20. Yeah, because people use that. They like to use that for Snapchat and Instagram and things like that.
Okay, thank you.